Hey guys, Brian from Boas here. Things have been really busy lately with shipping boas, with lots of the 2022 babies going out to their new homes. And I've been getting a lot of questions from you guys about the whole shipping process. Today I'm going to go over the high points of how this works. So if you're expecting to be getting a boa shipped to you from me or from any other boa seller, or if you're just curious about the shipping process, stay tuned for lots of information on that. So things have been super busy lately. You may have noticed I haven't released any YouTube videos on my normal schedule. I've just been so swamped with all the boa related tasks that there's just not enough hours in the day. Basically, I roll out of bed in the morning with boas on my mind. There's a certain number of things I need to do just to take care of my boas, the breeding colony as well as the new babies, as well as planning out the shipments, and sometimes I just don't have the time to make a video. If you grew up in the 80s in the Northeast like I did, you may remember a TV commercial for Dunkin' Donuts where the guy would roll out of bed at the crack of dawn and say it's time to make the donuts. Well, that's kind of like me, but it's, time to do the boas. That's just all that I have on my brain lately, and I just have to do it and, make sure I get everything done. That being said, we're, making progress. A lot of babies are already out to their new homes, and, the next couple months will be pretty busy till we reach the point where it gets a little too cold to ship, like in late November, early December. So until then, I have a number of boas that are going to go out to their new homes. What I'm going to say in this video is specific to my shipping procedures and policies, but other boa breeders and reptile suppliers have similar procedures. So much of what I'm going to say in general applies to, any reptile supplier. So first of all, the only way that I ship is by overnight FedEx. Okay, this is the only way we can ship reptiles. You can't ship them in the mail or UPS. So they're shipped FedEx priority overnight. And I only ship to a FedEx ship center. So I don't ship so that the FedEx truck is going to take the package and deliver it to your house. You have to go to the FedEx ship center and pick up the animal in the package there. And the reason being is that this reduces the risk, because if you have the package on the FedEx truck, it will take longer to get to the recipient, and there's less control over the conditions on that FedEx truck, okay? If it's really hot out, it could be hot in the back of those trucks. If it's really cold out, it could be cold. Sometimes the package could be delivered and it could be left. A package containing a boa might be left on your doorstep in New England in a winter blizzard or something like that. So I want to avoid this type of risk at all, if at all possible. And for that reason, you will have to go to the FedEx ship center. The FedEx ship centers are not all FedEx locations. In fact, there are many local FedEx counters in other types of stores that are not FedEx ship centers. So it can't just be any old FedEx location. If you're not sure about whether or not it's a FedEx ship center, just give me your zip code and I can look up the nearest FedEx ship center for you to choose from. And bear in mind that it might be a bit of a drive. So if you live in a major population area, it shouldn't be more than 10 or 15 miles. But if you live in the boondocks somewhere, it could be an hour or even more to drive to get your snake. So you're going to have to plan for that. And on the day that you're going to pick it up, you're going to have to plan for that transport. So I will communicate with you very closely about when it's going to go out, just to make absolutely sure that you're free on that day to go to the FedEx ship center and pick up your shipment. And I will also send you the tracking number so you'll know exactly where the package is. So the priority overnight packages are scheduled to arrive by 10:30, typically the next morning at the FedEx ship center. So the way it works is I pack up the animal, I take it to my FedEx ship center about half an hour north of me, and then I drop it off about 4 p.m. in the afternoon. And then it gets on the truck, probably about 5, goes to Oakland Airport, which is the nearest FedEx hub, and then it goes out to wherever it's going. And typically they'll go through Memphis, that's the intermediate hub, and then it goes to wherever it's going in the US. If you're in California, typically it's not going to go to Memphis, it's going to go directly in California. If the shipment's on time, it's going to make it to your FedEx ship center by 10:30 your local time. So if you're on the East Coast, that's 3 hours ahead of the West Coast, the total transit time is going to be somewhere around 15.5 to 16 hours. So it's really not that long of a time that your snake is packaged up. And there's no way that you can ship a snake that's going to be 100% stress-free, but this is a very low stress way to ship snakes, and it's very safe for snakes. Sometimes the shipment is delayed, and this happens probably about 10% of the time, where the package doesn't make it there by 10:30 the next morning. Usually it'll make it there by the afternoon. Sometimes it doesn't make it there till the following day. But even if it's in transit for 2 days or even 3 days total, things will be fine because the snake is securely packaged. I use heat packs in the winter, so you don't need to worry about anything bad happening to your snake, provided it's picked up at your FedEx ship center on the day that it arrives there. And this is the actual packaging that I use. This is the approved packaging for shipping reptiles. It's an outer cardboard box with an inner styrofoam liner. Okay, so it looks like this. It's just lined on all 6 sides with this 3/4 inch thick styrofoam. And then the boa is contained within the box in one of 2 ways. So sometimes I use these plastic deli style containers. Okay, and I put a substrate on the bottom, and the snake is securely packaged in here. It's inside of this box, and then there's newspaper around it just so that it doesn't move around. And typically I'll use these types of containers for smaller boas, and if I'm only sending 1 boa in a shipment, because you know, this box is big enough to contain one of these containers. Alternately, I sometimes use snake bags, these little snake bags, and I put 1 boa in each of these bags along with some paper towels. I use a zip cord to securely fasten the top of the bag so that the snake cannot get out. And I write on each bag the identification of the snake, because when I use these, typically there are multiple snakes in the shipment. And the bags go inside of this box, and there's newspaper around it to, you know, securely pad everything so everyone is going to be nice and comfortable. And with this size box, this is a 12 by 9 by 6 inch box. I can fit up to 4 or 5 of these bags in here. Okay, so that's the packaging. The other thing that I need to consider is whether to use a heat pack or not. So these are the little 40-hour chemical heat packs. You just open it up, it emits heat for at least 40 hours. Keeps everything nice and toasty inside of this box. And usually I'll attach it either to the lid, the styrofoam lid, or to one of the side panels, and it will emit heat and keep the boa nice and warm. So I don't always use these, and you have to be careful with these, because if it's too warm out, you can have heat build up by these things, and people have actually cooked snakes. In fact, I've seen some reports where people just haphazardly threw 3 or 4 of these in a box along with a reptile and shipped it, and it was cooked by the time it got to its destination. So you have to be careful with these. So generally speaking, I use these if it's going to be under 70 degrees on the receiving or shipping end. Typically, the shipping, if it's greater than 90 degrees, I don't ship. If it's below 40 degrees, I don't ship. And if it's between 40 and 90, I can ship. I don't use the heat packs unless it's like 70 or below. So these temperatures represent the highs for the day. So for example, if your temperature range is going to be between 76 and 94 degrees, I'm not going to ship because your high is above 90. Sometimes you have kind of a borderline situation when deciding whether you're going to use these heat packs or not. So let's say, for example, maybe on my end it's going to be in the 80s with the low in the 70s, but I'm shipping somewhere much cooler that's going to get down into the upper 50s with a high of about 70. Typically I would use the heat pack in that situation. However, if it was more like it was getting down to lows in the mid 60s, I probably wouldn't use one of these heat packs. I just have to kind of play it by ear. You know, I don't want the snake to be too cold, but I don't want to toast them either. In general, it's much better for your snake to be a little bit on the too cool side rather than the too hot side, because you can fry a snake in minutes if the temperature is above about 100. If the temperature gets below 70, as long as it's above around 50, the snakes are going to be fine for days. So if you do get your package and there's no heat pack and maybe got a little bit colder than anticipated, bring your snake inside, let him or her warm up, and he or she should be completely fine. Okay. I just don't want to fry snakes by using these heat packs too haphazardly. Before shipping any of my baby boas, I want to be 100% sure that they're 100% healthy. And that's why I hold them for a month and a half to 2 months before shipping, in which case I feed them several times and observe them just to make sure everything is going to be fine when they get to their new homes. Once in a while I'll have a snake that for whatever reason I decide shouldn't go out. And this happens not very often, but most often I might have a baby red tail that's been doing fine, and then I'm looking into the enclosure one day and I notice that it has regurgitated. And if you kept true red tails, you know regurgitation is an issue that can happen from time to time. As careful as you might be to try to prevent it, it still ends up happening. So I'm not going to ship any baby boa that has regurgitated until I'm convinced that it is fine and its digestive tract has healed up enough so that it can go to its new home. And I actually did have this happen recently. Usually in these cases I'll either hold the snake longer, and give a chance for it to eat several times before being shipped out, or I might allow somebody to select an alternate boa that they have in its place, or a refund. So that's usually what I do, and usually it works out fine. The person is happy to take the refund or to take the alternate boa. One thing that you should do on your end before agreeing to accept a shipment, or really before even purchasing a boa, is to make sure that the boa is what you want and ask all appropriate and relevant questions. I'm amazed at how many people ask questions the night before I'm going to ship a boa out. And these are probably questions they should have figured out, months or weeks ahead of time. For example, a lot of times people ask me right before I ship a boa if it's feeding on frozen thawed or if it needs live prey. And I'm more than happy to give this information freely. I try to get all my baby boas, when possible, feeding on frozen thawed. However, many of my island boas, like the quail key and cocker key boas, are somewhat reluctant to switch to the frozen thawed. And it might be 6 months or even a year of age by the time they switch. So if you're getting one of these boas and you only have frozen thawed prey items, make sure you check to see if they're feeding on the frozen thawed. Sometimes I can hold the boa a little longer and really try hard to get it onto the frozen thawed, but sometimes I can't guarantee that it's going to be feeding on frozen thawed. So make sure you ask things like this ahead of time, just so that you don't have any surprises when the boa arrives in its new home. So what you should do on the day that the boa is scheduled to arrive is you should be checking the tracking number through FedEx tracking on the FedEx site regularly to see if it has arrived or not. And then you should go to the shipping center as soon as possible after it arrives to pick up the package. So as I mentioned, it's usually there by 10:30. Sometimes it's there a little late, so you may not want to drive all the way if you're not sure that it's there yet. But once you're there, you're going to want to get home as quickly as possible and then carefully unpack the shipment. Open the box, carefully look at the animal, and inspect the shipment, inspect the animal, and let me know as soon as possible how everything looks. So I hope you're going to be 100% satisfied with the animal. But if you have any questions or concerns or comments, please get right back to me. In fact, I'll probably check in with you mid-morning just to see how things are going if I haven't heard from you. Because I like to know what happened to my animals and just to be 100% sure that they all made it safely. When you get your new baby boa home, you want to bear in mind that it may have just undergone a little bit of a stressful trip. Okay, it's been put in this little box and jostled around, and now it's in a completely different environment, in a completely different enclosure, different smells, different sights, different sounds. So it's understandably going to be a little bit stressed in many cases. It's not that uncommon for a snake to either strike out or to hiss or to be somewhat more aggressive than it normally is in this situation. In fact, I've gotten many boas shipped to me and I've taken them out of the bag, and the first thing they do is strike right out, start hissing, but then within a day or two they're completely fine and they're calmed down and they're totally docile. So it's not that uncommon for a snake to act a little bit more aggressive than it does after it has been shipped. You also want to give your snake space, okay? You don't want to be taking it out every 5 minutes and manhandling it and showing all your friends and taking a million pictures of it. Basically, you want to put it in its new enclosure. You want to give it quiet and space. You don't want to be constantly agitating it and messing with it. You also don't want to feed it immediately. So even if it hasn't eaten for a week or two, and typically I don't feed my snakes for at least a week before they're shipped out, you don't want to feed it for at least 5 to 7 days after it arrives. Just give it a chance to adjust and to acclimate to its new surroundings. I'm amazed by the number of people that email me the day after a snake arrives and they've already tried feeding it, and typically they will eat, but sometimes maybe it didn't eat the day after it arrived and they want to know why and that kind of thing. You just have to let your snake adjust, okay? Leave it alone for a while, put it in the cage, don't manhandle it. They need to adjust. One last point that I want to make when adding new snakes to the collection is you really should put any new arrivals into quarantine for a period of at least 3 months, preferably 6 months. And this is where you keep the snake in a completely separate room, ideally a completely separate building. You use completely separate equipment. There's no contact between the new snake and any of the snakes in your collection. And really, if you have more than one snake, you should be doing this. So I know that my snakes are 100% healthy. I know they're mite-free. I know that they're not going to, spread any parasites or disease to your snakes, but you don't know that. And when you order snakes from multiple sources and snakes are being shipped around all over the place and bought and sold like baseball cards, there's a lot of stuff out there going around. Trust me, if you don't do the quarantining, you're going to get mites sooner or later, and you'll probably get something more serious, some kind of infectious disease as well. So don't take any shortcuts. You really want to quarantine your animals, any new animals, just to protect your existing collection from any diseases or parasites that might be brought in. So that's a little bit about my shipping procedures and things that you should bear in mind when you're having new boas shipped to your collection. I hope this video was helpful and answered some of the questions that you might have. As always, shoot me any questions. I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for watching, and enjoy your boas.